Hello and welcome back to Rev Hi-Fi. Once again, my name is Mike Walsh. Got a very special guest with me today that I'm pretty excited to talk about, and your name being Chris Zähller.
Oh gosh, yeah, Chris. Actually, it's pronounced like sailor, so it's Zähler.
Zähller. See, I've been telling everybody your name's Zähller.
Yeah, don't
never
worry about it.
corrected.
Everybody says that anyway.
Zähler.
Yeah, Zähler.
Is that why the little...
That's actually why the umlaut's on there, although, you know, that's like my ancestors who came over on some ship in the 19th century stopped using that a long time ago. Around the time they added the extra L in, and you know, it's just an affectation that I put it back in there. But
hey, it stands out, and it's hard to type your name. I always feel stupid.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's because I mean, legally, the umlaut doesn't belong there anyway. So
all right, on. Well, you brought a record with you today, and since if you watched last episode, we did change format up a little bit, and we're doing the record review first. So before we get into talking about you, why don't you tell me a little bit about the record that you brought?
So this is one of the great psychedelic gems of the 1960s. This is Ogden's Nut Gone Flake by the Small Faces, who were later known as Rod Stewart's band, but he wasn't in the band then. They were actually friends with The Who at the time. That I think on their earliest recordings they had the same producer, an American guy named Shel Talmy, who kind of screwed all the bands he was working with. He actually lied to Decca Records to get the job about his resume, and The Who recorded a song called, or actually they didn't really record it because they hired another band to do it for them on the back of one of their singles. The song was called Waltz for a Pig, and the pig was Shel Talmy. But this record is by the Small Faces, and came out in 1968, and Side A is a mixture of psychedelic kind of hard rock stuff and sort of English music hall, rollicking, jolly good stuff. And then Side B is a sort of a concept album thing. It tells a story of a guy named Happiness Stan. He's a boy with magical powers who falls in love with the moon, but he sees that she's wasting away and disappearing from the sky, so he goes off on a quest to find her. And along the way he meets all kinds of interesting characters, including a hungry fly that he gives some dinner to, and the fly is so grateful that he wants to help him. So Stan says, well, I'll use my magical powers to make you really big, and you can give me a ride to go help find the moon. And the fly gives him a ride to meet Mad John, who's this hermit who lives in a cave. And Mad John explains to Stan that he's got it all wrong, and the moon isn't disappearing, she's just waxing and waning, and in the course of your journey, she's actually come back. Look at the sky, there she is.
So it's safe to say that this is an acid album.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
All right, well, I tell you what, we'll take a listen, and then for you guys watching, I'll do a full-on review right now, so stick around, okay?
So for all of you video game nerds out there, the title track of this album, that being Ogden's Nut Gone Flake by the Small Faces, is in the debut trailer for Grand Theft Auto 5. So there's that. But anyway, let's see, the Small Faces. Can't say that I've heard them before, or heard of them for that matter, but it's never too late to discover something very cool, and this album is very cool. Packaged in one of the coolest album covers I've seen, this record is so many things. First of all, it's a fantastic example of the apex of 60s psychedelia. It is also an awesome precursor to the heavy blues of Led Zeppelin and even a bit of Sabbath. Most interesting to myself is that this record is the forefather of the progressive movement that kicked off a year and a half after this record with King Crimson's In the Court of the Crimson King. And finally, it absolutely represents a group of artists giving in to their drug-induced influences that were so prominent in the late 60s to create something so original using sounds and ideas straight from the era. You'll hear the Doors, the Beatles, Steppenwolf, Jimi Hendrix, even the Grateful Dead smiling at the music coming off this record. If any of these elements sound interesting to you, you'll find something to like on this record. The first half is short and sweet and contains solid rock tunes, and while they range in style, it feels cohesive. Then flip to side 2, hopefully just when the LSD is kicking in, and you get to go on a little journey with Happiness Stan as he searches for the missing half of his beloved moon, befriending a fly who grows large enough for him to ride, And while they fly, they discuss the meaning of life before finding Mad John the Hermit in his cave explaining that the moon is full again, only then to sing Happiness Stan a song. Yeah, did I say drugs earlier? I meant a lot of drugs. But even sober, the story is made fun enough by Stanley Unwin's whimsical narration employing his self-made language Unwinese. Believe me, it's a trip well worth taking. If I had one complaint about this record, I'd say that it is very British. So at moments, to my ears, it can get a bit dry and feel like it has a stiff upper lip. But fortunately, it doesn't sustain it. No, overall, it's a breath of fresh air to hear what is very obviously a major influence on one of my favorite genres. I can almost see Syd Barrett relaxing in his flat with this record blaring.
All right, well, we're back. Excellent record, by the way. I dig on the 60s psychedelia. Hope you like the review. But let's go ahead and move on to you for a little bit. Well, that's why you're here.
All about me.
All about you.
Yeah.
Like your shirt, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I got a bunch of people who appreciate that.
Yeah, it's always fun when people recognize it like you did when I got here.
It's an excellent movie.
We're just going to leave that as a mystery for the viewers and see if they can figure it out.
Indeed, indeed. All right, well, let's talk about exactly why you're here and why I wanted you on the show is because you're doing something pretty similar to what I do. We're doing the video thing here, but you do it pretty much in a print form or in a blog form on mercury-photo.com.
Right, that's Mercury with a hyphen in it, photo.com.
And you strictly use the Mercury Photo for I see that you do some other things on there, but the bulk of it is promoting local music.
That's what it's turned out to be, but it's not what it initially was intended to be. I started photography a little over a year ago because of a friend of mine who is a local sign maker, Joe Crumley, I'll throw that out there. But he was a photography professor for a long time before he moved back to Oklahoma for family reasons. And he has this terrible habit of giving me things at Christmas time that lead to these terribly expensive hobbies. And a few years ago, he gave me a Hasselblad medium format camera, which is a very expensive Swedish camera, film camera. This one was, I think, made in the 1950s. The following year, he gave me his Leica M3 camera, which is a 35mm rangefinder camera. And after looking at it, collecting dust on my shelf for a few years, I got tired of it just sitting there doing nothing and decided I was going to start making pictures with it, did some research online, wound up buying some lenses, and in the meantime wound up spending way more money than I should have on the latest and greatest digital version of the Leica, which looks just about like the 1957 M3. I'm often mistaken for a film camera when people see me out with it because the basic design hasn't really changed. It looks almost exactly like an original M3. And, you'd really need to know your Leicas to tell the difference.
You called me a hipster earlier, and the first time I saw you with that camera, I was like, hipster.
It's kind of a hipster thing. I'm sorry to say, yes, it is. But so the thing was that when I started that blog, it was just going to be about Leica photography, and the type of photography that I thought I was going to be doing was street photography, abstract compositions, pictures of, grungy old doors on buildings, and, the decisive moment, that Henri Cartier-Bresson thing where I'd park myself somewhere and wait for something fantastic to come across the lens. And what wound up happening is that I went up to the zombie run that they have every year up in Guthrie, and it's usually a charity to raise money for some good cause. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to get some interesting images, and I took some really, I thought, pretty good pictures of the zombie run itself, and they had a party, which they called the Afterlife Party instead of an after party. Clever. And they had two bands playing. They had the Secret Post come down from Tulsa, and they had Kill the Reflection come on after them. Not too long after that, I think I hooked up with them on Facebook was what it was, and their frontman, Morgan Rout, invited me to go shoot a show of theirs up at the Hilo, which is actually where I met you. So they were the headliners with Collie Raw and Psychic Milk that night. And I handed a bunch of cards out that night, and I mentioned that I was interested in interviewing some of the bands to go with the pictures I'd taken with them. So I believe Kill the Reflection was the second band to get back with me to do an interview after that. It was actually David Goad with Kali Ra was the first one to get back to me. And by the time I did either of their interviews, I'd actually already interviewed some other bands because I realized, yeah, people really do want to do interviews to go with these pictures. I think at that point I'd already done a Dallas band called Risen. I'd done a phone interview with P-Lander Z, who's a Japanese band who was touring the U.S. Some of your viewers may know who they are. They're actually kind of a pretty big deal. Yeah. And I'd done a couple of other bands as well by the time I actually got around to doing those guys. But those guys are really what got the ball rolling for me because they were the ones who started talking to other bands and saying, there's this guy who's coming to our show, he's taking pictures of us, put them up on his blog, you should go look at this interview we did. You know, you should interview him, invite him, I should say, to your show because, you know, he can help promote your band, make you guys look good. So it's a rare weekend these days when I don't have band invites to go see a show, photograph, and have at least one interview waiting in the wings that I'm trying to transcribe or make time to actually get them to come down to the house and do the interview.
Well, yeah. What would you say? I don't want you to pick a favorite band, but what would you say that's currently up on their site? One of your favorite interviews. Not favorite band. I don't want you to pick band, but just like the favorite interview. That's something that shows off what best.
One of the email interviews I did that I really love is Mr. Gnome. But that one, I got some really good answers for it, and they're such a good band anyway that I was really just happy to be able to talk to them. And as far as other interviews that I've really enjoyed, David Goad was a great interview because he brought his wife, and I love it when bands bring their girlfriends, wives, husbands, and boyfriends because they will have
call the BS.
They'll call the BS, exactly.
And
they'll
anybody will call the BS.
They will.
It's Alicia Goad.
Yeah. Oh my God. And beyond that, Alicia offered to help me supplement that interview with a feature that we called 10 Things You Didn't Know About David Goad. So that's on there on part 2 of the interview, which is just some, let's just say, fun facts about David that might not be safe for work.
No.
And leave it at that. But I urge you to go read that one just for that. Even if you skip the interview, go read 10 Things You Didn't Know About David Goad. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Well, okay, let's get back to your art a little bit because I'd like to concentrate on that. Real quick, how long have you actually been doing photography? Not I don't want to say hobby, but as
in the way that I'm doing it now. You know, with this camera, serious about it, and not just, I had a little point and shoot, and I wasn't even taking it on vacation because I'd rather spend my time doing stuff than looking through a viewfinder. About a year. Just over a year.
Now, what would you consider? Do you try to do your photography completely by instinct and completely on your own, or
absolutely not?
Do you have an influence?
Absolutely not. I tried to find out as much about both the art and the technical aspects of photography as I could before I ever ordered a single thing off of the internet. I had no equipment. I spent 2 months just reading.
Well, let me ask you another question, going back to your technique. I kind of was interested, are you inspired by other photographers, like, very world-renowned photographers, or?
Well, everybody's inspired by HCB, Henri Cartier-Bresson, especially if they're people who wanted to do what I thought I was going to be doing, street photography. Gary Winogrand would be the other guy that I would point to as far as street photography. But portrait photographers too, Herb Ritz, people like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. You put.
But I'm going to research.
Put me on the spot here because there's others.
Well, I mean, I know a lot of
in the names.
The reason I ask, and because I knew you would be able to name some of these people, is I know a lot of people who love photography or getting into photography, and I guarantee you they don't know who you just mentioned. And I think it's a good idea that some people go out and I make movies. I know what films to go watch. Musicians can name off all of their inspirations, but photography is a different kind of art, and actually knowing some of the greats is. I think more people need to realize. That's why I asked you that question. right, I'm going to ask you a series of questions for real quick answers. A couple of these questions I'm going to ask you are things that I'm just really curious about, never would think to ask you. And the first one is, how old are you?
I'm a lot older than I look.
Me and Justin Hogan had a debate about how old you were, so we're going to solve this.
I made Lysandra from the Chloes at the interview I did with them. By the way, we talked earlier about fun interviews. That was a fun interview.
I bet. Those girls were
That
fun.
was a hoot. Mm-hmm. The actual doing the interview was a hoot. I made her feel young, and she's got people in the band who are a generation younger than her. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to say my exact age, but let's just say that I actually watched the Beatles cartoon when it was on the air when I was a kid, since we've talked about the Beatles already.
All right. I'm going to do the research.
Let's just say that. I watched the Beatles cartoon.
I didn't figure you'd answer that. Okay, second question. Favorite genre of music?
I don't have one.
Okay, what would you say is the genre that you listen to the most?
These days, I listen to a lot of kind of lo-fi indie rock and indie pop. I mentioned Mr. Gnome earlier, because I like stuff that's really noisy, but then I also like stuff that isn't, that's like melodic and has harmony singing it's like asking about your favorite kid.
I know, it's a weird thing.
I don't have one favorite genre of music. I listen to everything from ancient and medieval music to hip hop, to like bounce music from New Orleans, or crunk. So it's just everything in between. I could name some Desert Island selections.
Let's see.
I could absolutely.
All right, you telling me
Miles
that.
Davis, Kind of Blue.
Okay.
2 Beatles albums, Rubber Soul and Revolver. The mono mixes on both of those. We're talking about me being a hipster there.
Yeah,
That's
I know, right?
That's a hipster answer for you right there.
I think you got me beat.
Yeah, that is a hipster answer. The mono mixes, yeah. Not those stereo mixes. No.
All right, so that's 3. What's 4?
Yeah, Beethoven middle quartets. Yeah.
Classy guy.
Yeah.
You were eating cheese in high school,
absolutely.
right?
Oh, yeah. That fancy cheese I was eating in high school. We thought we were so cool drinking St. Pauli Dark and eating, imported stinky cheeses. Drive out to the country and,
That's what you do in
drink
Oklahoma.
beer while we were underage.
See, everybody thinks we're a bunch of hicks here in the state. And here you are, a high schooler, drinking German beer, eating cheese in the 1940s?
You got to understand the little crowd I was hanging out with weren't exactly the in crowd. So, yeah, that was the honor. All the kids that were in my honors English class, pretty much entirely. So, yeah.
So, okay, well, here we go. Next week, we're going to do a pretty special interview. I've invited you to actually be a guest interviewer, so I'm not going to be doing the interview on my own show next week. Is that about right?
That is correct.
And we're going to be interviewing Skating Polly.
And yep, those kids are going places.
That's what I hear.
In their genre, which we didn't really figure out what genre that was, but you'll hear that in the interview whenever we do it, because I kind of know what their answer is going to be on that one. They're kind of to their genre what John Fulbright is right now to Americana. They're getting a lot of attention from some very important people, and I think that if you haven't heard of them yet, you are going to be hearing about them.
We're gonna hear it from their own mouths who exactly they are, which I'm very excited about. Well, I want to thank you so much for bringing a record. It's nice to have a record that I had no clue even existed, and get to, especially a classic one, to get to listen to. So. Also, I'm not talking bad about musicians, but it's awfully nice to not talk about music for, consistently or anyway, or actually try to figure out.
Change it up.
And so,
that's why I never settled on a favorite genre, is because I just never want to listen to the same thing too long anyway.
Right. Indeed. So. Well, I appreciate you being on my show.
Thanks for bringing me down.
And I look forward to reading more of your blogs. You know what? Honestly, I'd like to work with you on stuff in the future.
We will be.
All right.
Starting with this Skating Polly interview. That's mercury-photo.com.
Yep, and there will be a link here and in the description. So, anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check out the site. It's fun. The interviews are lively, and the photography is fantastic. And it's a heck of a lot more professional than what you're seeing right now. But I still use Hotmail. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
It's going to be there for everybody to see.